What do you think is the most interesting psychology phenomenon? Childhood amnesia. The fact that up until a certain point you don't remember things. My first memory isn't until I was 6. My wife's is when she was 2. Hers seem to be emotionally based, so they are sparse and fleeting. Mine are like I just suddenly had a switch flipped, and there I was. If you get yourself to be really happy and excited to see other people, they will react the same to you. It doesn't always happen the first time, but it will definitely happen next time. Time and again this has always worked fine for me. How do you do that? Just act like a dog. Dogs are always excited to see people. The placebo effect. The idea that belief in something can actually have a positive impact on the body just seems so crazy to me. Also helped me realize inversely why stress and anxiety can take such a toll on you. Funny enough, placebo also works when you know it's placebo. Somehow, deep down, there is something in you that wants to believe despite all reasonable arguments against it. Also, nocebo is a thing. When you expect something to harm you, it will. It makes a lot of treatments complicated. On one hand you want the patient aware of the side effects. On the other, you don't want them to generate them by the nocebo effect. Déjà vu. To have such a strong feeling that an instance has happened before is crazy, like you experienced it in the past, or dreamed of it. The other vus are fascinating too. Presque vu is when something is on the tip of your tongue, but you can't remember it. Jamais vu is when something familiar seems unfamiliar. It's the opposite of déjà vu. If you're talking to someone intently and you hand them something, more often than not they'll take it. Doesn't matter if it's a book, a pen or an orange. No idea what the phenomenon is called, or if it's even psychological, but it's made for some great pranks. Locus of control. Lock. Lock basically is how you view control over your own life. People either have an internal lock where they believe they have the power to control their own lives, or an external lock where you believe everything in life comes from a source other than yourself. I got fired because my boss hates me. I was late because traffic, etc. Now, what's interesting is that studies have shown people with an internal lock find greater satisfaction and success in almost every aspect of life, except one. Being in a nursing home drives internal lock people crazy, while external lock people thrive. Wow, the nursing home bit is very fascinating. My grandmother did surprisingly well in a nursing home, and I think this probably explains why. I know for a fact I would hate living in one. Prospect theory. The idea that people perceive gain and loss unequally, where a loss has about twice as much impact on a person as a gain of same amount. People will take unnecessary risks to avoid loss. Like why I didn't cash in all my crypto at 20k. Cotard delusion, aka walking corpse syndrome, where the sufferer genuinely believes that they are dead, don't exist, or have no internal organs. Absolutely crazy. I can't imagine what it feels like walking around feeling actually, genuinely dead. I experienced this for a period of time after my dad passed away, when I was younger. It was terrifying and traumatic. I felt as if I was hollow inside, with no organs or vessels, just empty muscle, and was a ghost that everyone else could see. Thankfully those delusions don't plague my life anymore, but it was so dark and awful. How I can have a surprise in my dream. Like something will happen, and I'll be confused about it, then someone will explain it by giving new information, and then it makes sense. But all of this is created by my own brain while I'm dreaming. How can I reveal new information to myself to explain something? This also fascinates me. My brain has created things in my dreams that baffles me to this day. But isn't my brain supposed to be me? So where are these creations coming from? I have a roommate that never really opens their door, and I have only caught the briefest of glances into their room as he exits it. So I had no real idea what their room looked like. One night though I had a dream and my mind decided to stitch all these memory fragments together and recreated his room in my dream. Then when a couple days later I actually stepped into his room for the first time to check something out for him, it felt like I'd been there before, and my brain made a pretty accurate full representation. It felt crazy. Denial. The many answers to evade the truth are very creative. Denial is rooted in perception of threat. If you manage to convey the same words in a way that doesn't make it as a threat, you'll shave off most of it. Playing. When two animals play with each other, they both communicate aggression. They show fangs, claws, they bite, they go for the neck, etc. Everything about it should communicate danger, but they never feel endangered, even when one animal accidentally hurts another. This happens even when animals are playing with animals they have barely known for some time. It blows my mind how the right context completely transforms all the communication between animals who play. My understanding is that dogs have little pauses throughout a play fight that confirms it's just playing, and that dogs get so riled up when humans play fight because they sometimes can't tell when it's for real. Dissociative disorders. A dissociative disorder is a mental disorder that involves experiencing a disconnection and lack of continuity between thoughts, memories, surroundings, actions, and identity. People with dissociative disorders escape reality in ways that are involuntary and unhealthy and cause problems with functioning in everyday life. How people who hate themselves hate people who like them. How can I not think my friend is a shitty person when I look at who he hangs out with? How laughter affects people. Laughter is basically the yin to stress's yang, which inspires me to make people laugh when I can, as I don't know what they are going through. Laughter increases things like dopamine and can even help soothe physical pain sometimes. Even smiling, lifting the corners of your mouth, alone has positive effects on you, even if you force it. I'm amazed at the number of people who freeze in a disastrous situation like a sinking ship. People who survive tragedies like that always report that there's not nearly the amount of panic and confusion that you'd expect. A lot of people freeze in place and simply can't move, even as the water is rising around them. Families have been split up in situations like this, where two of them can move, but the other three can't. Sank a boat once with some friends in about 8 feet of water. Most of us started swimming for the riverbank, about 20 feet away, but I heard splashing. I looked back and my friend, who is a very capable swimmer, was splashing around looking helpless. I reached over and pulled him up by his collar, at which point he sort of snapped out of it and said, "Thanks man, I'm good." So bizarre. The water wasn't even that cold. It was early September. I figure he was just panicking and couldn't think enough to remember that he knows how to swim. Yep, the freeze reaction doesn't get the attention it deserves, and it's something that's actually really important for us to understand. Freezing is part of the same process that triggers the fight/flight response, and usually occurs when people can't do anything to actively exit or combat what's causing them stress. Freezing is a really old response evolutionarily speaking, and is something of a last-ditch way the body tries to save itself. As a result, people tend to go into fight/flight first, and then eventually freeze if they still can't control the stress they are experiencing. On the practical side, this has some hugely important implications for helping people in distress. If someone who is panicking suddenly becomes much less responsive or almost catatonic, they are not okay. It can look like they've calmed down, but most likely they've just entered the freeze response. That means that as their stress does reduce, they're going to go back into fight/flight before they actually get to a point where they feel better, and we have to be ready for that. On a more mundane note, in our personal life we also need to look for evidence of freeze in response to daily stressors. If you're super anxious about work and then start feeling less anxiety, but also tired/zoned out, you may be entering freeze. People mistake this for merely being worn out, when in reality their body is struggling to manage chronic stress. The bystander effect. Everyone thinks they would help if something happens, but the effect says that the more people there are, the less someone is going to help. I experienced this today on my commute. I started to get really dizzy/lightheaded and get tunnel vision. I was too out of it to ask for help, and everyone was just ignoring me. Until this one little old lady bullied someone into giving me their seat. All of a sudden I was surrounded by help. Someone was fanning me, another person gave me tissues, etc. I'm so incredibly grateful for that woman who stopped to ask if I was alright. Synesthesia. This happens when you experience one sensory stimulus and it triggers another. For example, you hear a splash and think of the color blue. I get this quite vividly with tastes. If I see a plastic fork, I always taste ketchup for some reason. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.